At her lavish birthday party, a little girl raised her hand, pointed at the black maid standing silently in the corner, and what she said next. It did not just silence the room, it shattered generations of silence. You will not believe what happened next. The sun spilled through the tall French windows, casting golden ribbons across the marble floor. The chandelier above sparkled like diamonds, refracting light over the guests in glittering bursts. Laughter echoed through the hall, layered with the soft clinks of cutlery and glasses. The scent of vanilla cake mixed with the distant aroma of fried appetizers and roses from the centerpieces. The house was alive with celebration. Dozens of children ran around in costumes, their faces painted and hands sticky with frosting. Parents gathered in corners, sipping champagne, exchanging smiles and small talk. At the center of it all stood a 7-year-old girl, Amelia, the birthday star. She wore a soft pink dress, embroidered with pearls, and a tiny tiara perched above her golden curls. Her blue eyes sparkled as she opened her gifts one by one, squealing after every doll, every box, every ribbon. But her gaze kept drifting toward the woman by the doorway. Marla the maid. Dark-skinned, quiet, dressed in her crisp white uniform with black trim. She stood with her hands clasped, back straight, eyes lowered, a half-smile frozen on her lips. She had been in the family service for years. Rarely noticed, rarely acknowledged, only spoken to when something needed to be fixed, cleaned, or brought. She was always there but never really seen. Until today. Amelia turned to her mother and tugged at her arm. "Mommy," she whispered loud enough for all to hear, "can I make a special birthday wish now?" The mother smiled and nodded. "Of course, darling. Anything you want." Amelia stepped onto the small stage set for the cake cutting. The candles flickered before her. She took a breath. Guests raised their phones. Everyone leaned in, waiting for a sweet, innocent request. "I want her," Amelia said, pointing her tiny finger straight at Marla. The room went still. Forks stopped mid-air. Laughter died. Eyes turned. Whispers froze. Marla looked up, startled, confused. Amelia's voice rang louder now, filled with the certainty only children possess. "I want Marla to sit with me." People blinked. Her mother stiffened. One of the guests chuckled nervously. But Amelia was not finished. "Not to serve," she added. "To sit next to me. Because she is the kindest person in this house. She sings me lullabies when I cry at night. She tells me stories when you are busy on your phone, Mommy. And when I scraped my knee last week, she kissed it and said I was brave." The room fell into a deeper silence. Marla's lips parted, but no words came out. Her hands trembled. Amelia stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. She held out her hand. "Please, Marla. Sit with me. I want you to eat cake with me. I want everyone to know how special you are. And that I love you." Tears rolled down Marla's cheeks, staining the front of her uniform. Nobody moved. Not a single camera clicked. Because for the first time they were not watching a birthday party. They were watching a truth that cut deeper than decoration or dessert. A little girl had just held up a mirror to the adults around her. And it was not pretty. Marla bent down and took Amelia's hand. Her voice was barely audible. "You are the only one who has ever seen me." Amelia smiled. "But you always saw me first." The crowd remained silent as they both walked to the table. Marla sat beside the birthday girl. A servant no longer. But seen. Respected. And as the first slice of cake was passed, the weight in the air began to lift. Not from sugar or sweetness. But from the realization that dignity comes not from status. But from kindness. And a child, unfiltered and pure, had reminded them all what that looked like. The knife glided through the cake. A clean cut. Precise. Marla's hand trembled slightly as Amelia passed her the first slice. Gasps echoed through the room, quiet but sharp. The birthday girl had handed the maid the very first piece of cake. Not her parents. Not her friends. Not the wealthy neighbors who had brought designer gifts. But Marla. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was reverent. A little girl had rewritten the rules of the room. And nobody knew quite what to say. The mother stood frozen, her smile faltering. Her perfectly manicured fingers clutched the stem of her glass just a little tighter. A flicker of something passed over her face. Was it embarrassment? Confusion? Jealousy? But Amelia, unbothered and unafraid, turned to her guests. "Marla is my best friend," she said clearly. "She always listens to me. She never lies to me. And she never makes me feel like I am not enough." The room shifted. Adults exchanged awkward glances. They sipped their drinks faster. Suddenly, the glossy surface of perfection began to crack. Because a child had spoken truth in a room full of performance. Marla blinked rapidly. Her fingers clutched the small plate of cake as if it were sacred. Her eyes scanned the faces before her. For years she had been invisible. The help. Background. Today a child had painted her in the brightest spotlight. She gently placed the plate down and leaned closer to Amelia. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "you do not need to do this." Amelia looked up. Innocent. Steady. "I am not doing this for you," she replied. "I am doing it because you deserve it." The words were simple, but they struck like thunder. One guest, a man in a gray tailored suit, cleared his throat and clapped once. Then again. Soon others joined in. Slow. Uneasy. But real. A ripple of claps filled the air. Not for the decorations. Not for the wealth on display. But for the truth that had burst through the walls like sunlight through storm clouds. Marla covered her mouth, holding back the sob rising in her throat. Nobody had ever clapped for her. Not once. Amelia stood beside her, proud and glowing. Not because she had made a grand gesture, but because she had simply told the truth. And that truth had power. More than status. More than money. More than every carefully curated detail in that glittering hall. The mother finally stepped forward. Her heels clicked on the marble like a metronome of tension. She knelt in front of her daughter, brushing back a golden curl. "Darling," she said softly, "why did you never tell me?" Amelia tilted her head. "I tried," she said. "But you always said you were busy." And Marla never was. A hush swept the crowd again. This time the silence stung. The mother's lips pressed together. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Not from pride, but from realization. From the mirror her daughter had just held up. Behind them, a photographer finally lifted his camera. But this time he captured something real. A moment not staged. A frame not filtered. A maid, eyes shining. A child, bold in her innocence. And a room full of adults finally learning that sometimes it takes a child to remind us what humanity looks like. The camera flash went off. Once. Twice. Then again. But no one was posing anymore. No fake smiles. No arranged angles. Just raw, unfiltered emotion. Marla sat upright beside Amelia, hands folded gently in her lap. She had never felt so exposed. So seen. And yet, not in a way that made her want to disappear. It felt like healing. Like sunlight reaching a place that had long been in shadow. The guests began whispering quietly at first. But it grew. Like wind rustling through dry leaves. "I never knew she was so close to the girl. She always seemed so quiet. Maybe we never paid attention. Maybe we never asked." Amelia leaned toward Marla again. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. "Even if it is not a party day?" Marla nodded, voice caught in her throat. "Of course, baby girl. Always." A tall man in a navy blue blazer stepped forward from the crowd. His name was Mr. Hawthorne, a family friend and CEO of a local law firm. He cleared his throat and looked at Marla. "You have been with them long?" Marla nodded slowly. 13 years. His brows lifted. "And they have never publicly acknowledged you?" She smiled gently. "No. They never had a reason to. Until now." He paused. Then turned to the parents. "I think you owe this woman more than just a salary. She raised your child's heart better than most nannies raise manners." The room rippled again. But this time in admiration. The mother stood in place, stunned by the shift in tide. This was no longer her party. It belonged to the little girl. And the woman she had overlooked for over a decade. Amelia took Marla's hand. "Can she cut the cake with me?" The crowd leaned in. Marla looked to the mother, unsure. For a moment, the mother's pride flared in her eyes. But then it faded. She nodded once. Of course. It was not easy. It was not graceful. But it was right. The two walked together to the cake. Marla picked up the silver knife with trembling fingers. Amelia placed her tiny hand on top of hers. Together they sliced through the final tier. The cake collapsed in perfect wedges, but what had truly been cut was far deeper. Years of hierarchy. Centuries of silence. Moments of invisibility. All undone by the innocence of a child. And the quiet strength of a woman who never asked for credit. Guests applauded. Not the fake, polite kind. The genuine, tearful kind. One child ran up and hugged Marla's waist. Then another. Then another. The floodgates had opened. For once, someone who was always last was finally first. Marla's eyes filled again, but she let the tears fall. This was not weakness. This was grace. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the music faded, Marla stood alone in the empty hall. She looked at the balloons on the floor, the scattered wrapping paper, the empty chairs. It was quiet again, but a different quiet. Amelia ran in from the hallway barefoot now, holding a crumpled drawing in her hand. She handed it to Marla. It was a crayon sketch. 2 stick figures, one tall, dark with a big smile, one small with a tiara. The caption in red said, "Me and my forever friend." Marla knelt and hugged her tightly. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as someone who finally knew what it meant to be loved openly, truly, visibly. Amelia whispered in her ear, "Today I gave you a piece of my birthday, but every day you give me all of your heart." And that left Marla more speechless than anything else ever had. The party ended, but the story did not. By morning, whispers from the event had already traveled beyond the garden walls. Neighbors spoke of the maid who sat beside the birthday girl. Colleagues shared clips from shaky phone videos and office group chats. And social media had begun to stir. A single photo had been posted by Mr. Hawthorne's assistant, a shot of Amelia handing Marla the first slice of cake. No filters. No edits. Just a child with an open heart. And a woman who had long been forgotten by the world, finally seen. The caption read, "This is what grace looks like. From the mouths of children we learn." By noon the photo had gone viral. Thousands of shares. Comments flooded in. Humanity, raw and unfiltered. Cried at my desk reading this. Reminds me of the nanny who raised me better than my own mother. Some criticized the parents. Others praised the girl. But most simply reflected. Because in a world hardened by status and screens, one child had pierced through it all with truth. Marla was unaware of the noise at first. She had returned to her modest room above the garage, folded her uniform as she always did, and sat quietly by the window. She still felt the echo of Amelia's hug in her arms. Still heard her words like music in her ears. But by evening the doorbell rang. Twice. Then again. Packages began to arrive. Cards. Flowers. Even a box of books titled, "For the Woman Who Raised a Leader." There were notes. "I saw your story online. Thank you for being someone's light. My daughter now knows what it means to see someone because of you." Even news reporters showed up. A soft-spoken journalist from a local network asked for an interview. Marla declined at first. She was not used to attention. But Amelia tugged at her hand again. "You always said truth matters," she whispered. "Let the world know yours." So she did. A quiet, humble interview in the family's backyard. No makeup. No rehearsed lines. Just honesty. "I am not a hero," Marla said gently into the camera. "I just chose to be present. When no one else was. That little girl saved me, not the other way around." The clip aired that night. It was only 3 minutes long. But it reached hearts across the country. An elderly woman in Chicago sent Marla a necklace that read, "Worthy." A teacher in Atlanta started a campaign called #SeeTheHelpers, encouraging students to thank custodians, cafeteria workers, and school aides. A senator even quoted her in a speech about dignity in the workforce. But through it all, Marla remained grounded. She still rose at dawn. Still folded towels with care. Still served breakfast quietly, until the mother placed a gentle hand on her wrist. "You do not need to serve anymore," she said. Her voice shook. "I would like you to help me raise my daughter. Not just clean up after her." Marla searched her face. And for the first time in 13 years she saw something different. Not pity. Not guilt. Not charity. But respect. She nodded. And the mother, eyes shimmering, added, "Maybe you can help raise me too." They both laughed. A little unsure. A little awkward. But real. Just like everything that had happened since that moment. The moment a little girl pointed across a room and shook the ground beneath an entire generation of silence. Time passed. The house, once filled with porcelain ornaments and cold silences, grew warmer. Not just in color, but in heart. The hall where Amelia had once pointed across the room now held a framed photograph on the wall. Marla and Amelia laughing mid-bite of cake. It was no longer just a memory. It was a turning point. A reminder of the day everything changed. Amelia grew older. The tiara gave way to textbooks. Balloons were replaced by debates and piano recitals. But some things never changed. Marla still made her favorite cinnamon tea after school. Still sat on the edge of her bed when teenage storms threatened her smile. Still called her "my brave girl" when the world became too loud. And Amelia? She still held Marla's hand when she felt small. Still turned to her when her voice trembled. Still saw her as clearly as she did the day of her 7th birthday. But what no one expected was what Amelia would become. At 19, she stood before a packed auditorium as the youngest recipient of the National Award for Youth Leadership in Social Justice. Her speech was calm, measured, but her words struck like truth always does. "I was raised in a house that taught me manners," she said. "But I was raised into a person by someone the world tried to keep invisible." She did not have a title or applause, but she gave me something that most people never receive: unconditional presence. She taught me that power without empathy is just noise, and that silence in the face of injustice is worse than any lie. The audience rose to their feet, not because she was eloquent, but because she was real. The next day, Marla's photo appeared in a national newspaper beside Amelia's, not with the headline "Maid," but with the words, "The woman who raised a leader." Journalists sought Marla's story again, but she declined politely. She did not need attention. She had already received what she had always longed for: to be seen, to be valued, to matter. Amelia would later open a foundation called The First Slice. It provided scholarships and support to caretakers, domestic workers, and nannies across the country, those whose names never made headlines, but whose hands built futures. At the entrance of the foundation office hung a plaque. Read, "In honor of the woman who sat beside me when no one else did." And underneath it, in Amelia's handwriting, "Marla, my forever friend." Back in the family home, now quieter than it once was, Marla sat in the garden, a letter in her hand. From a child she had once sung lullabies to, now a young woman changing the world. "Come visit soon," it said. "I miss your tea." Marla smiled. She folded the letter carefully, placed it beside her cup, and looked up at the sky. The same sky that had once watched her stand at the edge of rooms, now watched her at the center of a legacy. All because a little girl had once pointed at her, not to command her, but to lift her, and in doing so lifted them both, forever. The train pulled into the station with a slow groan. Steam hissed from the sides. Passengers bustled out, briefcases, backpacks, loud voices echoing across the platform. But Marla sat quietly by the window, hands resting on a worn leather purse. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope tucked inside. The letter. Amelia's handwriting, now more polished, confident, but still unmistakably hers. "Come visit soon. I miss your tea." Marla stepped off the train. The air smelled of rain on hot pavement. A city buzzed around her, tall and fast, so unlike the quiet suburb she had spent her years in. But she did not feel lost, because her heart was leading her somewhere familiar. She followed the directions exactly. Amelia had written them on the back of the letter. Turn left at the bookstore. Walk past the fountain with the bronze lions. Stop at the glass building with wildflowers in front. That was it. The First Slice Foundation. The building stood tall yet inviting. Its walls were lined with ivy. A small plaque beside the door read, "Dignity belongs to everyone." Inside, the space glowed with natural light. Wood floors, warm colors, laughter from the hallway, and framed photographs, dozens of them. Women in uniforms, elders with grandchildren, young scholars with arms full of books, all smiling, all honored. Marla stepped in slowly, heart pounding. A receptionist glanced up. Eyes widened. She stood immediately. "Are you Marla?" Marla nodded. The receptionist rushed around the desk and gently took her hands. "We have waited so long to meet you." Before she could respond, a familiar voice called from behind the hallway. "Let her through." Amelia appeared. Not as a little girl in a pink dress, but as a woman, tall, poised, wearing a white blouse and black trousers, hair pulled back neatly. But her eyes, still the same, still warm, still full of fire and kindness. Marla froze. Her breath caught. Amelia ran forward and wrapped her in a hug so tight, so full, it felt like time itself had folded. "I missed you," Amelia whispered. Marla's voice broke as she replied, "I never stopped thinking about you." They stood there for a long time. Two lives shaped by love, not blood. Bound not by duty but by choice. By heart. Amelia led Marla through the foundation. She showed her the scholarship wall, rows of names of students supported by the program. She showed her the Day of Dignity calendar, a holiday created in honor of domestic workers. She showed her the interview room, where women now shared their stories without shame. And finally, she brought her to a small sunlit corner. A table, 2 chairs, a teapot, a photo frame. Inside the frame, the crayon drawing, 2 stick figures. Me and my forever friend. Marla's eyes welled up. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Amelia said softly. You already did. Years ago. When you chose to stay. When you chose to care. She poured the tea. The same cinnamon blend. The same taste. Only now. They were not in the background of someone else's life. They were the center of their own story. Later that afternoon, a group of young students gathered in the hall. They had heard Marla was visiting. One girl stood up, about Amelia's age when it all began. She asked, Ms. Marla, can you tell us how you stayed so kind even when others ignored you? Marla smiled. Her voice gentle. Her words slow. Because I was never waiting to be seen, she said. I was just waiting for the right heart to look. And when it did, everything changed. The sun dipped low behind the city skyline. Golden light filtered through the tall windows of the foundation's main hall. Marla stood by the glass, a warm cup of tea in her hands, watching the world she once thought she would never be part of. Behind her, Amelia spoke with donors, students, mentors, her presence commanding but never loud. It was the eve of her foundation's 10th anniversary. And tonight's gala would be the biggest yet. Marla had seen it all grow. Not from the sidelines. But from the heart of it. She was not staff. Not even a guest. She was the beginning. The story people told when they needed to remember why they do what they do. The light at the root of everything. A soft knock came at the door. It was Amelia. No cameras. No crowd. Just the girl she had once rocked to sleep. I thought you would be getting ready, Marla smiled. I was, Amelia said, stepping in, but I needed a moment with you first. They sat together by the window, side by side in silence for a while. Then Amelia reached into her bag and pulled out a velvet box. She opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate, handcrafted brooch, an open hand holding a heart made of gold. Amelia pinned it gently onto Marla's dress. It is the first legacy pin, she whispered. Every year, someone who changes lives without asking for credit will receive one. But only one person could ever receive the first. Marla's fingers touched the brooch, her voice trembling. I never needed this. I know, Amelia smiled, eyes glistening. But the world did. She stood and reached for Marla's hand. Come, she said softly. They are waiting. Marla stepped into the gala hall to a standing ovation. Hundreds of people rose to their feet. Some with hands over their hearts. Others wiping tears. They did not cheer because she was famous. They cheered because she had lived with love when no one was watching. She stood for those whose stories never made it past kitchen doors. She stood for dignity, for quiet strength, for love that raises. And as she stood there, next to Amelia, she realized something. This was not her ending. It was her echo. Her legacy would live on in every child given a chance. Every woman lifted from silence. Every heart that chose to look instead of overlook. Later that night, as the music faded and the lights dimmed, Marla stepped outside into the cool night air. Stars blinked quietly above her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. No applause. No spotlight. Just peace. A life once unseen. Now forever remembered. Because one child saw her, pointed, and said something that changed the world. And that was enough. Forever.